Good evening and welcome. It is time once again for CU Immigration Forum here on WRFU LP Urbana 104.5 FM. I will be your host for this evening. My name is Mr. Garza, and I'm here to let you know that WRFU is an open forum for the Urbana-Champaign community. That's right. That views expressed are those of the speakers, in this case myself and a couple of other people that we will talk to in a second. And those views are not intended to represent WRFU, UC, IMC, or the Urbana Socialist Forum, or, as we like to say on the TV version of this, UPTV. These views are our own, and by our, in this instance, I mean myself and my two charming guests who will introduce themselves right now, I hope.
My name is Ann Abbot, and I teach Spanish at the University of Illinois.
Okay.
My name is Alli Gattari, and I'm a student at the University of Illinois.
I see. So you have something in common then.
We
Both
do.
At the University of Illinois. And we happen to be in the same town as the University of Illinois, so that kind of, there's something going on here. I'm not sure what it is. But anyway, you two wouldn't perhaps have the same class or anything, would you?
We spend 2 hours together each week in a course. Last semester, we spent those 2 hours together in a course called Spanish in the Community. And this semester, we're spending those 2 hours together each week in a course called Spanish and Entrepreneurship, which is actually about social entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
Spanish in the Community. Well, how is that different from Spanish?
So a lot of the work that we do as students, so we are placed in the community, and it's kind of the first time where I was actually had to use my Spanish in a real life situation. So I've volunteered at Prairie Elementary School in their dual language program for a second grade class. Many other students work at the Refugee Center in Urbana. There are a few other students in the program at Garden Hills called SOAR.
And we have had students work in the past with Latino Boy Scouts here in town, and with a woman named Alejandra Coronel at I still call it Provena. Presence, I believe, is the name of it, in a clinical setting. And then we've had students at Francis Nelson Clinic.
We also have students at Crisis Nursery.
La Línea. So really it's a mixture of human service agencies where my students go to use their Spanish to help those agencies meet their mission with the Spanish speakers here in town, and civic organizations, and then the schools.
So Spanish in the Community isn't just about unlearning all the proper ways of speaking and picking up a bunch of slang. It's also about how you can use it as a tool for doing good in the world or something like that.
Let's hear what Alli has to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, we don't necessarily focus on grammar, so a lot of, these are higher level classes, so all of Ann's students has already kind of been through grammars and structure of Spanish, but we do talk about different, so like I work at an elementary school, so we've talked about different ways of how to, speak in front of the class, or what sort of commands that you say in front of the kids that would be appropriate, but we really focus on kind of the issues that a lot of our clients are dealing with, and so we'll talk about a variety of we're always discussing of either immigration, or we focus on unaccompanied minor situation. We've watched documentaries.
So the idea is that in class, students get the information that they need to be prepared to go out in the community, understand what it is that they're seeing, observing, hearing, but with some tools in Spanish and other kinds of tools to be of help in these organizations, not to be a hindrance.
So you're teaching culture at the same time, sort of?
There's lots of culture
and it's sort of a sociological twist to it and everything. So this isn't just Spanish. It's not just a Spanish class.
It's not just Spanish, and it's not just Spanish in the community in the sense that I don't just say to the students, okay, go volunteer and there's your course. No,
we all meet up every week and we discuss what happens to us in the community, the stories that we hear that happen to our clients of kind of, something that happens in the classroom that really stood out to me, so I'll bring it up to other students, and then that usually spirals into other everyone has a story from that week, and we kind of all analyze, like, well, why is this a problem, or I'm thinking of one story in particular of Anissa and one of her clients.
So that's an interesting story. So this was last semester, and one of my students was working at the refugee center. And a woman came in, and she had been having problems with a Latina woman, and she had been having problems with her neighbors, and one neighbor in particular was really harassing her, giving her lots of problems, and really, it seemed as if it was racially based and linguistically based, and those sorts of differences. And she came in, and she was talking to Guadalupe and Maite, probably, in the refugee center, and the thing that had triggered the latest episode was that she and her family were celebrating La Novena, which is this cultural practice of not all people from Latin America, but in some parts of Latin America, that when someone dies, they spend 9 days in mourning. And part of that practice can include building an altar, having candles going, flowers. But in this family's case, it seems as if they also had sort of a miniature coffin that they had made as part of this cultural practice of theirs. And Alli, you might fill in some details here that I forget, but basically this person was spreading rumors that they were doing something wicked, that they were doing something awful because there was this coffin. Do you remember?
Yeah, and I guess the woman called the police, and that was involved in it.
And that's one of the things that we talk about too. Like, so you have this one particular issue that's very interesting. I don't think that most of my students had ever heard what is La Novena. Alli, did you know about that before?
No.
So if I can make a little parenthesis here, I think what comes up in this class is the Spanish classes, the traditional regular Spanish classes, do a lot of good, and they give these students a real good basis in the language and in the culture. But there are gaps. And that's what you come to see in this class, what students haven't picked up in their high school Spanish and in their other Spanish classes. And what they haven't picked up is kind of what really is going on.
And what's really important, I was at a DAPA workshop recently, and I was talking with a client about her arrest history. And so I was kind of put in that real life situation, and I'm listening to the client if he's kind of going on and on and on and using so many gestures, and I'm trying to track down everything into an e-file, and it was like, okay, this is I know this is something that I want to do in the future, but it's just showing me that I really need to improve. And kind of listening to him too was just, it was a real life situation where you're just not like analyzing different texts or working in a textbook or anything like that.
Well, language is what I think a lot of people don't understand, and I will out myself and say I didn't understand this at all myself for many years, is that language is more than just a set of sounds that you make that convey a particular meaning. So there's glasses in English, and it would be, something else in this language, as if they were all interchangeable. And I really did, I hate to say this, but I really did for many years just think that everybody had a different word for everything, but that the structure was the same. The point of what you said was the same. And it took me a long time and finally exposure around people who spoke different languages to understand that it's so much more than that. Language embodies a way of thinking, a way of feeling about things. It's an expression of those attitudes of who you are and how you are and what kind of people you are, if I can put it like that. And so it seems like you can only get so far by learning the words, and then there's this whole other aspect to it, which I'm gathering is what you teach in this class. Is exactly. Like, what do you do with the language now that you know the words? How do you put them together in ways that make sense to people that have a whole different way of thinking about things or doing things and way of living and seeing the world and all that sort of thing? So is that the idea behind this class? Is that what you were thinking? Or
that's part of it. And part of it is what Alli said before. It's asking students. Well, let me back up a little bit and just tell you how the course started.
Okay.
So in 2004, I had been for several years teaching and coordinating a course called, I think it was called Intensive Spoken Spanish. So it was sort of the conversation course, and then this was the next level of conversation course. And what I saw was that I had these wonderful students. They were really passionate about Spanish, really good at Spanish. Many of them had studied abroad already and were coming back from study abroad. But I just saw them sort of plateau, that they weren't getting any further by talking to each other about their weekends, talking to each other. A lot of what we do in Spanish, especially at the lower level, is self-referential. So let's learn Spanish by talking about ourselves. And I want to find out about you. But this was an opportunity. In 2004, the Vice Chancellor for Public Engagement put out a call for proposals to create new service learning courses. It was called community-based learning courses. And so I had a friend at that time, Lilia Hazlett, who was working at the Refugee Center. So 2004, there hadn't been in the previous years, let's just say that was sort of in the midst of a real surge in the Latino population here.
Yeah.
And so I would, during the day, be with my students who I thought, they're great and they want to learn, but it's just, they're not getting up to that next level. And then I would, hang out with Lily, and she would tell me about some really urgent and basic needs that these new people in our community, Spanish speakers, they had, and that they were difficult to meet, and that the Refugee Center was scrambling to try to meet these things. And it finally dawned on me, I've got these students who need a challenge. I've got this challenge that needs students. And so we put that together in 2004, and it's been going ever since.
Wow, very good. I think that's a great idea. And I wish more courses at the university took into account what you could do with your learning other than get a job or get, start a career. Because I think a lot of the schools like engineering and all these things are geared towards, let's just push people on into the job market, and we're kind of training them, sort of high-tech version of a jobs, industrial arts type thing. Like, you too can work on an assembly line, If they thought more in terms of like, what can you do with this knowledge that will help people?
Right.
And you can help yourself. Yeah, you can get a job and you can do all that stuff too. But isn't helping people part of being a good citizen of the world, sort of? So, well,
I always say, why in the world would you learn Spanish if your intention wasn't to speak with Spanish speakers?
I'll go to Spain on my vacation.
Yes. But since you mentioned engineering, Alli, do you want to just talk a moment about the link classes that we have that are in engineering?
Right. So right now through the engineering department, there are a lot of different service learning classes through the program called Link, and it is run by Val Werpensky and Shakank Sharma, and they lead a multitude of courses that go to helping with water quality in India, helping kind of working at the, I don't know exactly what they do at a university in Haiti, but they have gone to the University of Haiti as well. They have a partnership with a school in Uganda, and just a variety of countries and opportunities for students to kind of be in that situation as a project manager and think, okay, we have this problem, it's, and focus on international development and learn how to work with each other, and kind of at a, first at the university of like a smaller scale, and then move it on to something much bigger.
That's great. I wish that model were replicated over and over in all sorts of different ways. I think that would be just wonderful. And I'm sure there are lots of things like that that go on that I'm not unaware of.
Unfortunately, there aren't lots.
Oh.
There are some. And unfortunately, I think a lot of students, maybe they stumble upon these opportunities. And maybe they don't. Maybe they go a full 4 years, get their degree, and they never took these classes. And so I think that the university needs to, and maybe is, changing the way that they think about how we can connect learning and the community, how we can connect the campus and the community, how we can learn from the community. Because what I always say is, it's not just about, in my classes, it's not just about learning about other cultures, it's about learning from other cultures too. What can you learn from them? Not just what can you go help them with, what do they need from you, what's your ability that you need to give to these people who have a challenge. No, you have challenges that maybe you're not even aware of.
Right.
and you need to learn from them. They've got some things figured out that you don't have figured out, and what can you learn from them?
Right. There is this disconnect because I feel like in other courses that I've taken, especially in leadership courses, it's like, okay, once you get into the job market, you're going to have to work with people. You need to have this emotional intelligence. It's always like that buzzword. But through all my other classes, I've never really given the opportunity to work with other people or be in a group setting. So with Anne's class, I'm also right now working on a project with a few other students, fundraising for unaccompanied migrant children in the area. And so it's interesting because we're all working together as a team. We all have a variety of ideas, and we're all, we have the same mission, but how are we going to go about and actually accomplish that? And so I think that's a great opportunity to work with students, and because that's what you're going to be doing in the job market, and it's preparing you for the future.
Yeah, I can see that, and I guess that all kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about how language embodies culture and all that sort of thing. Is like, that's something that you need. That's something you can be enriched by if you're open to it, if you are aware that this is something I can learn from this. There are phrases and words in other languages that say things that don't exist in English at all, and there's not even a way of saying it. And we run into this with the Japanese. I'm pointing off camera right now to my friend from Japan who's visiting us and teaching me words and phrases, and I'll say, well, okay, what does this mean? It's like, it doesn't really have a meaning. There's not really a translation for this.
Right.
It's used like this. You use it like, well, what was it? Just yesterday we were talking about, you answer the phone, mushy mush. Mushy mush. It doesn't actually mean anything, right? It's just, but it's the way you answer the phone. So it's like there isn't a translation for it. You could translate it as hello, but it's not hello.
Right.
It is, I'm answering the phone, or are you there? Or
it's fascinating.
Something like that, And there's a lot of things like that just, it seems kind of quirky and funny, but it actually, you're opening yourself up to an entirely new way of thinking about things if you look at it the right way, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, and if you're actually using the language, and you have to, so in a lot of classes, let's just say Spanish classes, you're using the language because that's your assignment,
right?
And you need to get the grade. And we have great faculty. We have very interesting courses, and so that's all good. But when you make it into a community service learning course, students are learning the Spanish to solve a problem. They've got someone like Alli, the example she just gave, I've got someone right in front of me who needs me to fill out this form for them. Or if they're tutoring in the schools, I've got this child who needs to work on their literacy skills, or they need to solve this math problem. And so they're not thinking about their Spanish like a grade. It is, I'm using my Spanish because that's the language we need to be speaking to each other to solve this problem that's right in front of us. That's a different kind of learning than the other courses might give them.
And you really have to change your mentality for that. And you can kind of see that with students in the class of like kind of having to make that switch, because there's just not a lot of courses offered like that at the university. But I think you brought up a great point, Mr. Garza, about being open to that, because I know with my community partners in front of the little kids, I have second graders, but some of them are native speakers of Spanish and some are native speakers of English. So it's a mixed bag of kids. But, I make mistakes in front of them. And I think at first I was really embarrassed, because I'm like, okay, like, you're 8, I'm 21, this is really embarrassing. I just on accident said a swear word and you guys all know it, and it's 9 in the morning, I haven't had coffee. But, it's laughing about it, and it's sharing that moment with them of like, I'm learning, you're learning. It's like Anne said, it's just kind of that symbiotic relationship of like, we're in this together, and I think it's just being open and, willing to make those mistakes, because that's when you learn the most.
So how do you negotiate, they invented the term Hispanics to cover the fact that there's this huge part of the world, like a quarter of the world, a third of the world that speaks Spanish in different ways. And it's all right in the place that they do it, but a lot of it is completely wrong if you took it from textbooks in Spain. how do you navigate that space? Because those are the people you're going to run into. You're not going to run into people who also learned from textbooks. You're going to learn people who just learn from their parents or their friends or whatever, and they've got this whole new slangy sort of way of speaking. Is that just does that completely throw you, or are you getting pretty good at kind of like, oh, right.
Let me say something, and then I totally want to hear what you have to say, Alli. So I tell people it's like in English, I have to struggle to understand people from New Zealand or from other countries, or people who speak English in the Deep South sometimes, or from different subgroups within the United States, and different people of different class and regions and things like that. And so, I want students to understand that that's not a Spanish problem. This idea of different languages, and you've learned one kind of language, one kind of register, one kind of dialect, and then you're going to have to negotiate meaning amongst people who speak other dialects. That happens to us all the time. So it's not a Spanish problem. But when you are studying Spanish, that's what it feels like, and it feels like, oh my gosh, I don't know enough Spanish. I will never know enough Spanish. But the same thing is going to happen to you in your native language too. So I think that's important to state. And Alli, do you want to talk about how it really plays out in real life when you're doing this? Your textbook Spanish versus what you do in the community? Right,
definitely. And especially I think because I work more with younger kids, so it's hard sometimes, and I don't even understand a lot of younger kids in English a lot of the time, so I always try to think about it that way too. Right. But but I think when you learn the most when you are talking with people in the community, and it all
and you can correct me if I'm wrong or add to what I'm saying. I think that what you end up doing is, we cannot teach students every way of saying every word. It would just be a catalog and a dictionary, as you know. And so what you need to have is a firm foundation in Spanish, and you need to have some strategies, just some basic communication strategies, which are listening and knowing how to ask questions when you don't understand something, knowing how to phrase your question so that you get the answer that you want. So one of the lessons that I often teach is about talking on the telephone in Spanish, because it's very difficult for students, but they need to do it, especially if they're working at the refugee center, La Línea, which is all about the telephone. Yeah. And so I go over with them some scenarios. So imagine that someone is speaking to you in Spanish on the telephone, and you got it all except for the last part of what they said. What do you say to that person? And really the only tool that many of my students know at that point is repita, por favor, please repeat. And I said, well, what's going to happen if that's what you say to them? They're going to repeat the whole entire thing that you understood, and you're still probably not going to understand that last bit, which is what you didn't understand. And so let me give you some tools, some phrases, some strategies that you can use so that you can actually improve this communication. And so I teach them things like, I understood all of this except the last part. Could you please repeat the last part? Or if it's a telephone number, which my students often struggle with a lot, let me see if I got this right, and then repeat the numbers to them. These are just some basic communication strategies that you're going to use in English or in Spanish too. So you have to relieve yourself of this notion that you have to understand everything. And instead you have to think, I can be a strategic communicator, and I can ask questions, and the right kinds of questions when I don't understand something, and I can try to make sure that I have understood if I think I have understood.
That's kind of a good way of describing what I do. I sort of absorb parts of languages, but I've got like a mental block, and I cannot seem to get it so that, I think we were talking about this, weren't we, the other day at the thing, where I can understand it, but I can't speak it. I can get it in. So what I've learned to do, but even then I only get parts of it. So what I've learned to do is put together body language, facial expression, the mood in the room, like temperature, atmosphere, and what words I know, in order to understand what is being communicated to me. So I may only get like 3 or 4 words that you're saying, but I'll get the sense of it. I'll get I'll know that your mood.
Right.
I'll know whether you're trying to get something from me or give something to me. You know, very basic kinds of things like that. But from that, I can follow things in a way that's well beyond my comprehension level. So I think all of that is like useful. I'm not sure how you teach somebody that. I mean, that's
that's great. I mean, that's kind of what happens when we are in our situations in the community. You have to think on your feet because things change. You know, you might, this has happened to me multiple times where I've walked into the dual language program and the teacher isn't there. She's sick. And so then now we have a substitute there who doesn't know a lick of Spanish. So then it's kind of puts me in the situation, well, I wasn't expecting today to lead the classroom, but I'm going to. Okay. Yeah. And so I have to think on your feet. And I didn't have something planned, but I'm reading directions, I'm translating. And so it is, picking up on mood, kind of what's going on with everyone around you. But that's great.
But, I have to say the thing that I really admire about what you just described about what you do is that you're not paying attention to yourself. You're paying attention to the other person. And I find that many times when people are speaking a second language of theirs, they're so worried, what's the next word that I want to say? What was that verb form that I was supposed to use? Oh my gosh, did I make it a mistake? That they're thinking about themselves.
Yeah.
And you're saying, you can really have a good communication when you just put the emphasis on the other person. And that is so smart and rare, I would say. That's a gift.
Well, that's all about communication in general, I think. Just in anything, any language with anybody is what are they giving you? What is coming towards you and what is expected or hoped for in return? And that's the reciprocal thing of a communication. Otherwise, it's just like, all right, hurry up. I've got something I wanted to say, and I don't want you to change the subject too much because then my point won't be as effective as it would have been if you just shut up right now, which is kind of what every academic conference seems to me to be like. And people in the audience are sitting like, I've just thought of something really cool to say that's going to make me look a lot smarter than you, and I'm just waiting for my chance.
Happens all the time. But, I want to share just one really specific example. What you've made me think about this in terms of just vocabulary that students learn versus what they actually hear when they're working in the community. And one specific word is hablar, to speak. And so that's the word that you learn in all the textbooks. That's the word that you use all the time about speaking. And then, they go into the community, and many of the people here say platicar. And I have had students come to me in class and say, what does platicar mean? Because they never learned it in a classroom. Or I had one student say practicar, so they didn't even, weren't really able to understand that word itself. Is our time up?
I'm so sorry. Our time is up today. If you would like, we could stick around and do a second one, but otherwise we have to say goodbye for the TV portion of the show.
There's so much more to say.
So I'll let you think about that while I say thank you very much for watching you and or listening. You've been listening to CU Immigration here on WRFU LP Urbana 104.5 FM and or UPTV. Hello, UPTV. And we thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.